Well, students, to class today. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're working hard in all of your studies, including mathematics. Please remember my philosophy. I try to go fast on the videos. For those that are advanced, you can hopefully grasp the concepts quickly, and those that are not, you can rewind different parts and listen to it 2 or 3 times if you need to. So we're trying to meet everyone's needs that way. But welcome to class today. We are still going through some review sections from Algebra 2 last year, and we'll continue to do that today. You will have a quiz to take over the weekend, okay? So understand that, be ready for that. There will be a quiz over the weekend, and I will email that to your parents. There'll be an attachment on the email, and you can run that, and you can snail mail that back to me. I'll give you my address real quick, 361. Sorry about the 3, that's pretty sloppy. 361 Castleview Drive. Castleview Drive, that's a W there. And that's Ringgold, Georgia 30736. Ringgold. So you can snail mail the quiz to me, or you can attach it, scan it to your computer and attach it, or you can just bring it to my house, whatever you choose, okay? So let's go ahead and get started. Please grab your notebook, your pen. I do try to go quickly. I want you to focus on your homework, and I don't want these videos to be super long. So let's grab your notebook and let's get started. We're going to look at 3 different review topics today. 3 different review topics. And again, you'll have to pause the video a lot. I'm going to put things up, tell you to copy it down and move on, and you'll have to probably pause the video and copy it down. Go ahead and copy this heading in your notes, please. We are looking today at terms and degrees of polynomials. Terms and degrees of polynomials. Now, I'm not going to give you a long definition of what a polynomial is. We did cover that in Algebra 2. I will give you a picture of what a polynomial looks like, and this would be an example of a polynomial. You do not need to write this in your notes, but you can if you want to. It's up to you. Notice we have variables. Our variable in this polynomial would be an x. Notice we have coefficients in front of the x's. Here's a 2, here's a negative 16, a 3. Notice we have a constant term at the end right here, negative 5. This is what we call a polynomial, okay? And what we're going to look at today is how to figure out how many terms a polynomial has and what the degree is, all right? So that's what we're going to do. Let's go ahead and get started with this first problem, please. Actually, this is not a problem. I want to go over really specifically what a term is, all right? So I do want you to write this in your notes. Now, again, you'll have to pause the video a lot. I'm going to go fast, but go ahead and copy this in your notes, please. 15, a to the 4th, b cubed, e to the 9th, gmxy, x to the 5th, yz squared. Now, I put a very long expression up here for one reason. When you look at something like this, you might say, wow, that must have a lot of terms. That's probably got 5 or 6 terms. Actually, this entire expression right here is exactly one term. One term. And let me explain why. Now, some of you know that already, and some of you don't. Let me explain why. Here's why this expression has one term. Everything in here, and again, you take notes as you feel like you need to take notes. Everything in here is multiplying. Notice how they're all side by side, so you could really say 15 times a to the 4th times b to the 3rd times e to the 9th, etc., etc. Everything in here is multiplying, and so that's why we have one term, okay? Write this sentence in your notes, please. Write this down. Positive and negative signs. Positive and negative signs divide an expression. I should have had this typed already. I apologize. I forgot to. Positive and negative signs divide an expression into terms. And I'm going to explain that in just a second. Now, I'm getting ready to erase this, so you might want to pause the video if you're not done copying this, okay? Positive and negative signs divide an expression into terms. And here's what I mean by that. Okay, watch this carefully. If I were to go up here and squeeze a plus sign right here, guess what? Now I have 2 terms. All of these are multiplying together, so that's one term. And then here's a plus sign, so that separates this group, and here is my second term. So I have 2 terms. Pretty cool, huh? You know what else? Watch this. If I were to take a positive sign And again, how you take notes right now is up to you. You might not be able to write all this down. Just make sure you listen and understand. If I put a minus sign right here, now I've got 3 terms. Watch. I start right here, and I move along until I come to a negative or a positive sign. There's one, so I stop. Now I continue on. Oh, there's a positive sign, so I stop, and I continue on. Look at that, 3 terms. 1, 2, 3. 3 terms. If I were to put a positive sign right here, now I have 4 terms. 1, there's a negative sign. 2, there's a positive sign. 3, there's a positive sign. 4. So I hope you're understanding how we know how many terms a polynomial expression has, because it's really, really important that you know that. We're going to get into factoring later on, and you have to know how to factor a binomial. That's a 2-termer, a trinomial. That's a 3-termer, etc. You're going to have to know how to recognize these different situations, okay? So positives and negatives divide an expression up into terms. Now let's talk about degrees of polynomials. Let's go back to our heading. Remember what we're doing right now. We're looking at terms and degrees of polynomials, all right? Okay. Please copy this in your notes. Please copy this in your notes. 2x to the 5th minus 3x squared plus 4y minus 6. Now, first of all, I would like you to tell me in your notes how many terms this expression has. So here we go. Let's see how many terms. Well, I start here and I go along. Little music there. Oh, there's a negative sign, so I stop. Then I continue. Oh, there's a positive sign, so I stop. Then I continue. There's a negative sign, so I stop. And then I go to the end. So it looks like we have 4 terms. 1, 2, 3, 4. So this expression has 4 terms. So go ahead and write that in your notes. How many terms? 4. Now, I would like you to tell me what the degree of this polynomial is. Well, we covered this last year in Algebra 2. You look at your variables. That's the letters, for those that don't know, your variables, your x's and your y's, and you look for the highest exponent. Well, this x has an exponent of 5. This term has this x term here has an exponent of 2, and this y has an exponent of, even though you can't see it, it's a 1. Which one of those numbers is the highest? 1, 2, or 5? Well, 5 is. So guess what the degree is? We call this a 5th degree polynomial, because you look at the highest exponent. It's so easy, isn't it? Piece of cake. Now, they're going to get harder in a second, I will admit that, but for right now, it's pretty simple. All right, let's try another one. Copy this in your notes. 7a squared b to the 4th minus 3ab to the 6th plus 10a cubed b cubed. Now, we're going to run into a little bit of a problem here, so please pay attention. First of all, I would like you to tell me how many terms this expression has. How many terms? All right. So here we go. I start here, move along. There's a negative sign. I stop, move along. There's a positive sign, move along. 3 terms. Okay? Hopefully you're getting that by now. 3 terms. All right, let's continue on. Now, here's where it gets a little interesting. If you were to look up here, you would think, oh, I know what the degree is, Mr. Earhart. The highest exponent is a 6. And I didn't misspeak on my last example, but I want to show you something. The degree of this is not 6. Did you get that? It's not 6, so pay attention. Let's go back a page. Notice this was 1 term, and I only had 1 variable. Notice this is 1 term, and I have 1 variable. Notice this is 1 term, and I have 1 variable. Do you see that? Now, let's jump into this problem. Here's 1 term. Oh, but I have 2 variables, an a and a b. So guess what you have to do? You have to add up all of your exponents in this term. Now, not the 7. We're talking about the a and the b, your variables. So if I add these 2 together, I get 6. Come over here. Oh, don't forget, this a has an exponent of what? A 1. Don't forget that. So add up your exponents in this term, you would get a 7. And then add up your exponents in this term, and you would get a 6. Now, which one has the highest number? Well, this one does right here, obviously, and it's a 7. So we say the degree of this polynomial function is 7. It's a 7th degree. Now, you know, Mr. Earhart, I'm a big fan of you guys doing your homework, not just listening to me teach. So you might really grasp this. It might be a little sketchy. I'm a little confused, but that's okay. Let's go ahead and I'm not going to give you any homework on these. types here. I am going to give you homework, but not on this. So let's go ahead and quickly do 4 problems together in your notes, okay? So here we go. Grab your book. Again, you might have to pause the video because I'm going to keep moving, but that's what it's all about. Pause it as often as you need to. Go ahead and grab your textbook. Turn to page 20 and look at numbers 1 through 4. Please grab your textbook, turn to page 20, and look at numbers 1 through 4. Now, we are going to work on these 4 problems together. If you're really confident and you want to work ahead and knock yourself out. If you want to work with me, that's totally fine too. So here's the first problem. All right, in the directions it says, tell how many terms and what the degree is. So I'm going to put T for terms. How's that, okay? You know I'm not. I better put terms. All right, so here we go. How many terms do we have in this polynomial expression? Well, I start here. And there's 1. Then I see a positive sign. Well, Mr. Hart, there's a negative sign out front. True, but there was nothing over here to divide it from anything. So we just start right here. Then there's a positive sign. There's a positive sign. There's a negative sign. There's a negative sign. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 terms. All right. So go ahead and write that down. We have 5 terms. Now, what's the degree? Well, we go to each term and we add up all the exponents. Well, here I only have 1 exponent. In this term, it's a 4. Here, I only have 1 exponent. It's a 3. Here, I only have 1 exponent. It's a 2. Here, I only have 1 exponent, and even though you can't see it, it's a 1. So what's the biggest number you see? Well, obviously, it's a 4. So I would call this a 4th degree polynomial. Pretty cool, huh? 4th, my pen's messing up. Sorry about that. 4th degree polynomial. All right, let's move on to number 2. All right, now, let's count the terms first of all. How many terms does this expression have? Well, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I have 4 terms. All right. Now in this term, the highest exponent, or the only exponent, is 3. In this term, the only exponent is 2. In this term, the only exponent is 1. And here there isn't an exponent. So the highest number I see is 3, so I'm going to call this a 4th degree. If you're hearing an annoying beeping sound in the background, that's because there's something going off here. I'm going to have to check that a little bit later, but hopefully you can just ignore that. So we're going to call this a 3rd degree. 3rd degree. All right, let's continue on and take a look at the next one. All right, here we go. First of all, let's count the terms. Well, there's 1. I see a negative sign. There's 1. There's 1. And there's 1. So first of all, right off the bat, I know I have 4 terms. All right. Now, let's talk about the degree. Let's go to our first term. I have an exponent of 4 and an exponent of 1. We're going to add those together. We get a 5. Here I've got a 3 and a 3. Add those together and I get a 6. Here I've got a 1 and a 1. Add those together and I get a 2. And here there's no A or B anywhere, so nothing here. So what's the biggest number that you see? 6. So we call this a 6th degree polynomial. One more, and I hope you're grasping this, because at the end of the class period, I'm going to tell you what's going to be on your quiz, and this is part of the stuff that will be on your quiz. Okay, now let's do the last one. How many terms does this polynomial expression have? And I promise you, I'm not that sloppy. This pen is kind of freezing up here on my computer. All right, how many terms? Well, let's see. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. So we got 4 terms. Now let's find out what the degree is. All right. Now here my exponents 3 and 2 would add up to 5. In this term they would add up to 6. And here my exponents, there's a 1 right here, would add up to 3. So the highest number I see is 6. So we call this a 6th degree polynomial. All right. I hope that's been helpful. So far we've reviewed, and this should be reviewed, degrees and terms of a polynomial expression. All right, let's continue on. Okay, now we're going to get into one of the most dreaded subjects that students, or topics that students really do dread, and those that had me in Algebra 2 know that, but it's so important. I cannot stress to you how important factoring is. If you can't factor, quite frankly, without any exaggeration, you're going to struggle throughout the whole course. Okay, you have to know how to factor. So if you struggle with this, please Pay close attention. If you never had factoring, please listen, listen, listen. I will try to explain it well, but you're going to have to listen, take good notes, and do your homework, okay? So we're going to look at about 4 or 5 different types of factoring. Now, relax, not today. I'm not going to throw all of that at you today. We're going to look at 2 quick types of factoring right now, and then we'll be done for the day, except for the homework that you'll have to do and study for your quiz. But the first type of factoring I want to talk about is what we call factoring out common factors. And notice we're moving on now to section 4 out of the review chapter, okay? So we're going to look at factoring out common factors. Are you ready? Here we go. All right, please copy this problem in your notes. Copy this down. What we want to do is we want to factor out what we find common, now listen, in every term. So here's a term, here's a term, here's a term. Always start with your coefficients first. So my coefficient here is, well, not coefficient, sorry. My constant term is 15. My coefficient here is 10. And my coefficient here is 5. So you say to yourself, what number goes into all of these numbers evenly? And it needs to be the biggest number. Well, that goes into all these numbers evenly. Well, the biggest number that goes into 5, 10, and 15 evenly is 5. So go ahead and write a 5. That's pretty easy. Hopefully you see that okay. All right? 5 goes into 5, 5 goes into 10, and 5 goes into 15. Now take a look at your variables, your x's. Notice I have 2 x's here. Notice I have 1 x here, even though you can't see that 1. Oh, notice I have no x's here. So let me ask you a question. If we're trying to pull out, if you look at the directions here, if we're trying to pull out factors that are what? Common, then that means we're trying to pull out of each one of these terms what is common. Now, if we're looking here, students, for what's common, then I'm not going to pull any x's out. Yes, this term has an x, or 2 of them. Yes, this term has an x, but this term here does not have any x's at all. Do you see that? So I don't want to pull an x out because not all 3 terms have an x. So here's what we're going to do. We've pulled a 5 out. And here's what you do next. Now, for some of you, this is completely brand new. Others of you are falling asleep out of boredom, okay? So whichever camp you fall in, pay attention here if you're really struggling, okay? What you do next is you put a parentheses. And here's what you do. You take this number here, and you say, okay, 5 times what would give me 15? 3. So you put a 3 here. 5 times 3 gives me 15. Now, we come over here. 5 times what would give me 10x? Well, 5 times 2x. Isn't that right? 5 times 2x would give me 10x. So you put a 2x here. And then you say to yourself, okay, self, what would I put here? 5 times what would give me 5x squared? Well, 5 times, think about it, 5 times x squared. I mean, 5 times x squared gives you 5x squared. And that's called factoring. You went backwards. In the past, the other day, I was giving you problems like this, and you were multiplying and getting this answer here. Now I'm giving you this answer right here, and you're going backwards and breaking it down into a parentheses. All right? Now I've got 4 more examples to give you, plus plenty of homework, so you'll get a lot of practice. So here we go. Now if you're really acing this and you're like, man, this is boring, and you want to fast forward the video, feel free to. That is totally fine, okay? That is your decision. Okay, let's move on to this next problem. Now, please pay attention. If you're struggling, let's start off with our coefficients. Notice we have coefficients of 12 and 20. What goes into both of those numbers evenly? Well, 2 does, but that's not the biggest. That's not the biggest number that goes into 12 and 20. There's a bigger number. And if you'll think for a second, you'll realize it's 4. 4 goes into both of those numbers evenly, and it's the biggest number. All right? Now let's take a look at our x's and our y's. Now watch carefully. Now when I look at these x's and y's, I want to show you something. Let's go back one problem. Now in this problem here, this term had an x, this term did, and this one didn't. But now look at this problem. I have an x here and an x here. Now how many x's do I have here? 2. How many x's do I have here? 3. There's no way you can take 3 x's out of both of these. There's only 2 here. But you can take 2 x's out of both of them. So I'm going to go ahead and take 2x's out. Now look at your y's. I have 2 y's here, and I have 1 y here. Well, there's no way I can take 2 y's out of both of them because there's only 1 y here, but I can take 1 y out of both of them, so I'm going to go ahead and put a y here. So this is the common factor that I'm going to pull out. In the last problem, the common factor I pulled out was a 5, okay? And hopefully you guys see that okay, all right? Now, let's go ahead and jump back to this problem. Now let's go ahead and put our parentheses. There we go. And now here we go. Just like the last problem. You would say to yourself, 4x squared y times what would give me this right here? Well, let's say I know I want 3 because 4 times 3 is 12. I know I've got x squared here and x squared here, so I'm not worried about that. I've got a y and a y squared. I better put a y here. Let's see what happens. 4 times 3 is 12. X squared times nothing is x squared. And y times y is y squared. So it worked. This times this gave me this right here. Totally worked. All right, let's try this. 4x squared y times what would give me a negative 20x cubed y? Well, I know for sure I want a negative 5, right? Because 4 times negative 5 gives me negative 20. Okay, so we should know that. Now, x squared times x, right? X squared times x would give me x cubed. And then I have 1y here, and I have 1y here. So I don't want to put a y here. So I think I've got it. 4x squared y times negative 5x would give me negative 20x cubed y. Totally works, okay? So there, we have factored out the common factor. All right, let's go on to the next problem. Now it totally zoomed out. Okay, I hope this video is working. I paused it there for a second. Okay, here we go. Let's continue on. Hopefully it is. All right, now let's go ahead and factor out what's common here in this expression. I have a coefficient of 20 and a coefficient of negative 5. So I say to myself, what's the biggest number that goes into both of those? Well, obviously it's 5. Now look at your variables. Notice you have an x in this term, but you do not have an x in this term. So don't pull out an x. You can only pull out what's common in both of these terms. Now, notice I have 2 y's here, and I have 5 y's here. Well, there's no way I can pull 5 y's out of both of these, but I can definitely pull 2 y's out of both of them. So I'm going to go ahead and put y squared. Here we go. Now, 5y squared times something, I've got to put something in the blank here, will give me 20xy squared. Well, I know for sure that I need a 4. And I know I need an x. There's no x over here, so I know I need an x. And I have y squared here and y squared here, so I'm not going to put a y. If I put a y here, y squared times y would be y cubed. I don't want that. So 5y squared times 4x is 20xy squared. I did it. Now I've got to put something in this blank over here. All right, so let's see. 5 times negative 1, right? 5 times negative 1 is negative 5. And here I've got 2 y's. I need 5, so I better put y to the third, because 5y squared times negative 1y cubed is negative 5y squared. So there, I did it. All right, moving on to the next problem. All right, go ahead and copy this in your notes. Now this is definitely an advanced problem, and so hang in there if you're struggling a little bit. All right, and let's see if we can't figure this out. All right, because I have parentheses here, pulling all of this stuff together, we're going to look at this as one term. All right, and then because of the parentheses here, I'm going to look at this as another term. Now if you'll look, they both have an x squared minus 3. So since they both have an x squared minus 3, excuse me, this is a really hard problem to see, so don't get discouraged if you're confused. Just watch. If they both have an x squared minus 3, I'm going to pull it out, put a parentheses, and if I pull out an x squared minus 3, I'm left with an a, and if I pull out an x squared minus 3, I'm left with a negative 2. So there, you factor this. Now that was a real difficult problem, I understand that, but it's something good for you to think about. Now I want to go fast. I don't want this to be too long of a class. I try to keep it within 30 minutes. Hopefully I've done that. If not, I apologize. I've got 4 more problems to show you under one more topic, and then you can start your homework, okay? So go ahead and copy this down, please. We just talked about factoring out the common factor, and now I want to show you something called factoring by grouping. Again, I'm going pretty fast, but really this should be review if you've had Algebra 2. All right, factoring by grouping, and this is the R chapter still, lesson 4. All right, here we go. So we're going to look at 4 problems, and let me kind of teach you how to do this. Now we're going to apply this principle tomorrow, well actually Monday, a little further, so pay really good attention. All right, factoring by grouping. Now we apply this to a 4-term expression, usually. In this class, we're going to apply this method to a 4-term expression, and we have 4 terms. Okay, so here's what I want you to do, and please watch this very, very carefully. If you've not copied this in your notes yet, go ahead and copy this in your notes. And what I want us to do here, there we go. Sorry, class, I apologize. Things are working a little slow today. Let's see if it'll pop back up again. There we go. All right, now what you do is you look at the first 2 terms, okay? Look at the first 2 terms, and we're going to pull out what's common in the first 2. Now notice I have a 3 here and a 1 here, a coefficient of 1. All right, so what number goes into 3 and 1 evenly? Well, nothing, really, just 1. If you want to put a 1, you can. You don't have to. It's up to you. I don't care. Now look at your x's. You have 3 x's and 2 x's, okay? So we know we can't pull 3 x's out of both of these, but we definitely can pull 2 x's out of both of those. So I'm going to go ahead and put x squared. And I'm going to put a little parentheses. Let me slide this over a little more. Put a little parentheses. All right. And now watch. 1x squared times what would give me 3x cubed? Well, it should be 3x. Let's see if that's right. 1 times 3 is 3. X squared times x is x cubed. It worked. Now, 1x squared times what would give me a negative 1x squared? Well, probably a negative 1. Think about that, students. 1 times negative 1 is negative 1, and x squared times no x's is x squared. So there we go. So what I just did is I pulled out what was common, or the common factor in the first 2 terms. Now, let's take a look at the last 2 terms. Remember, it's 4 terms. We looked at the first 2, now we're going to look at the last 2. All right. What number goes into 6 and 18 evenly? Well, a positive 6. All right. Is there an x in this term? Yes, but is there an x in this term? No. So I cannot pull an x out. So I'm going to say 6 times what would give me 18x? Well, 6 times 3x would give me 18x. And 6 times what would give me negative 6? Negative 1. So there we go. 6 times 3x is 18x. 6 times negative 1 is negative 6. And now look what happened. This is so cool. This will not always happen, but in these problems it will happen. Look, our 2 parentheses match. So I can very simply write my matching parentheses once, 3x minus 1, cross them off, and you're left over with x squared, I got that from right here, plus 6. I got that from right here. There we go. That's called factoring by grouping. If you were to take this expression and multiply it back out, you would get this right here, what you started with. Let's try another one, okay? I believe it's really important that we try another one. Okay, let's take a look at, once again, let's take a look. We're going to factor by grouping. Let's take a look at our first 2 terms, okay? There's no coefficients, so I'm not going to worry about that, but I have 3 y's and 2 y's. So I know I can pull out 2 y's. Now, let's see. Y squared times what would give me y cubed? Well, y squared times y. And y squared times what would give me negative y squared? Well, probably a negative 1. Think about it. Y squared times negative 1 is negative y squared. All right. Now, let's look at our last 2 terms here. Let's pull out what's common in these 2 terms. Let's pull out a, well, we have a 2 and a 2. So what number goes into 2 and 2 evenly? Well, obviously a 2 does. So I'm going to pull out a positive 2. There we go. Now, I have a y in this term. Do I have a y in this term? The answer is no, I don't. So, If I don't have a y in those terms, I can't pull a y out. So 2 times what? Well, 2 times y. 2 times y gives me 2y. And then 2 times negative 1. 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. And now look, your parentheses match. So if your parentheses match y minus 1, you write it one time, cross it off, and then you're left over with y squared plus 2. So put a parentheses, y squared plus 2. Let's do one more. I think I've waxed eloquent long enough. Let's try one more, and I'm going to skip the other example. I want to find one with a minus sign. Here we go. This will be a good one. Okay, copy this in your notes, please. Again, you might have to pause the video. I'm going to move fast, but go ahead and copy this in your notes. All right, here we go. All right, let's factor this by grouping. All right, let's look at our first two terms. Notice I have a 1 here and a 6. What number goes into 1 and 6 evenly? Well, just a 1. If you want to put the 1, you can. You don't have to. It's up to you. Now I have 3 t's and 2 t's. You cannot pull 3 t's out of both of those, but you can pull out 2 t's. So t squared. And now let's see what I'm left over with. 1t squared times t would give me t cubed. Think about it. T squared times t is t cubed. And now over here, I would put just simply 6 because t squared, or 1t squared, times 6 is 6t squared. There, I pulled out the common factor. Now let's go to the last two terms, and let's pull out what is common. Now, do you notice how there's a negative sign right here? Do you all see that? Let's go back to the previous problem we did. We had a plus sign right here, not a negative. Let's go to the previous problem before that, right here. We had a plus sign, not a negative. So this will be the first problem that we've done that has a negative sign there. Whenever this term here has a negative sign, whatever you pull out, you need to make it negative. So I'm going to pull out a negative sign. Always do that when there's a negative there. And I have a 2 and a 12. Now what number goes into 2 and 12 evenly? Well, 2 does, obviously. So I'm going to put a 2. All right. And there's not a t in both terms, so I cannot pull out a t. So here we go. All I can pull out is a negative 2. So negative 2 times t is negative 2t. And then negative 2 times, watch your signs here, a positive 6, right? You want a negative 12. A negative 2 times a positive 6 is a negative 12. So there, we pulled out the common factor of negative 2. And now, with that in mind, let's go ahead and let's see. Yep, our parentheses match. We have a t plus 6 and a t plus 6. So write that parentheses one time, and then you're left over with t squared minus 2. So t squared minus 2. And that's called factoring by grouping. You really need to know those two methods. I'm going to go ahead and give you the homework assignment I want you to work on. There it is. And now let's go over the quiz. Are you ready? Let's fly. I'm going to go really fast. All right. This is what's on the quiz. You had better study before you take the quiz. I'm going to give you a number, and you're going to convert it to scientific notation, like 2,200,000. And you're going to put 2.2 times 10 to the 6th, okay? And then number 2, I'm going to go fast. You'll probably have to pause the video. I'm actually late, to be honest with you, to pick up my children from school. So I want to really quickly here finish going over this quiz. So 0.000005, I would want you to put 5 times 10 to the negative 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so be able to go both. Let me put an arrow like this. I'm going to put an arrow on both ends. If I give you this, be able to go to this. If I give you this, be able to write it like this. Be able to go both ways. Okay. All right. Number 3. Make sure you know how to multiply. Multiply scientific notation numbers. Okay. We've went over that. It was in your homework. Know how to do it. Number 4, make sure you know how to divide scientific notation numbers. Okay? Again, very important. Then also, we had a section on adding, subtracting, and multiplying polynomials. I believe that was yesterday's work. Okay? Know how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide polynomials. Number 6, be able to do what we did today, which is find the degree and terms of a polynomial. be able to do that, please. And then also, what else did we do today? Remember, we factored out the common factor. Remember that? And then I know I'm kind of going out of order here, but now number 8, factor by grouping. So it is your job to really study. Make sure you can do all of these problems. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to call me. So number 7, make sure you can factor out a common factor. And we did that way back here, right here, right there. And then number 8, factor by grouping. And that's what we just did, a problem like that, factor by grouping. So these are the 8 things that will be on your quiz. It is very, very, very important that you study. Call me if you have questions. Please don't hesitate to do that. And be ready for your quiz. I will email that to your parents tomorrow on Friday. I will email that to them.